Okay, so today we're going deep into Godzilla,
Oh, yeah.
this iconic Japanese monster that I'm sure most people have at least seen at some point in their lives.
Right. Whether you're a diehard fan or just recognize the name,
Yeah.
there's just so much to uncover about Godzilla.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited about this deep dive because the sources you send over are really fascinating.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, we've got articles detailing the entire history of the films and how Godzilla has impacted culture worldwide.
Mm-hmm. We've even got some stuff about the business side of things, like how this franchise has managed to stay so popular and profitable for,
So long.
yeah, for over, well, it's almost 70 years at this point, which is incredible.
I know. So where should we even begin with all this? I guess the best place to start is with the genesis of Godzilla himself, right?
Definitely. So the very first film, simply titled Godzilla or Gojira in Japanese, premiered in 1954.
1954.
I know, right? And get
Uh-huh.
this, it's actually recognized by the Guinness World Records as the longest continuously running film series.
Seriously.
No joke. Think about it. They've been making Godzilla films pretty much nonstop since 1954, even with a few breaks here and there.
That's wild. But I'm curious about the name itself. Gojira, it's not just a random made-up word, is it?
It was not random at all. It's actually a combination of gorilla, which is gorira in Japanese, and whale Kujira.
Oh, wow. So like a gorilla whale.
Exactly.
E-
And when you think about Godzilla's massive size, his strength, and the fact that he comes from the ocean, it's a pretty fitting name, right?
It totally makes sense. So this first film from 1954, what was the cultural climate like in Japan at the time?
Well, this was post-war Japan, remember? So the country was still dealing with the aftermath of World War II and especially the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Right.
The trauma of those events was still very real. And there was this widespread anxiety about nuclear weapons and radiation.
Which actually ties directly into the film's narrative, because in the original Godzilla, the monster is awakened and empowered by nuclear radiation.
Exactly. It wasn't just some random monster causing chaos.
Yeah.
It was a very deliberate metaphor for the destructive power of nuclear weapons and the fear that they represented.
So it was a monster movie, but also a very potent commentary on the state of the world.
Absolutely. And those fears were very much at the forefront of people's minds because just a few years before the film's release, there was the Lucky Dragon #5 incident.
The fishing boat.
Yeah, the Japanese fishing vessel that was caught in the fallout of the Castle Bravo nuclear test at Bikini Atoll.
Wow, I'd forgotten about that.
Well, that incident really brought home the dangers of nuclear testing and contamination, and it caused a huge public outcry in Japan.
It's crazy to think how much that one event must have influenced the creation of Godzilla.
It was a major factor for sure, but the filmmakers were also inspired by other things that were popular at the time.
Like what?
Well, the re-release of King Kong in the early 50s was a big commercial success, and it showed that there was a real appetite for these kinds of giant monster movies.
Makes sense.
And there was another film that was even more directly influential, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
I don't think I've seen that one.
It's a classic. It came out in 1953, and it was about a prehistoric monster that was awakened by atomic testing. And it kind of set the stage for a lot of the monster movies that came after it, including Godzilla.
I'll have to check it out.
You should. But let's talk about the people who actually made Godzilla happen. The director, Ishiro Honda, and the special effects director, Eiji Tsuburaya.
Those are legendary names in Japanese cinema, right?
Absolutely. Honda was known for his ability to tell these really compelling stories that dealt with serious themes, and Tsuburaya, well, he was a master of special effects.
He was a pioneer of tokusatsu, wasn't he?
He basically invented it. And tokusatsu is this unique Japanese style of special effects filmmaking that relies heavily on practical techniques.
So like miniature sets and people in suits.
Exactly. They were incredibly skilled at creating these believable and often terrifying monster effects using those methods.
Those techniques are still used today, right? Even with all the advancements in CGI?
Oh yeah, definitely tokusatsu has had a huge influence on filmmaking worldwide, and it's still highly respected for its artistry and craftsmanship.
It's amazing how they were able to pull off those effects back in the 50s.
It really is. And, Godzilla wasn't just a hit in Japan. It actually made its way over to America in 1956.
But it wasn't just a straight translation of the original film, was it?
No, it wasn't. The American release was called Godzilla, King of the Monsters. And they actually added new footage with the American actor Raymond Burr.
Really? What was that all about?
Well, they basically wanted to make it more appealing to Western audiences, so they created a new storyline where Burr's character was this American reporter who witnessed all the chaos caused by Godzilla.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was definitely a different take on the story. And they also toned down some of the more political aspects of the original film.
Which is kind of understandable given the whole Cold War context at the time.
Right. They probably didn't want to make it too controversial or unsettling for American audiences.
So that's the origin story of Godzilla, but as we know, the franchise didn't stop there.
Oh, not even close. There are over 30 Godzilla films, and they're generally categorized into different eras based on the reign of the Japanese emperors during which they were made.
Okay, so break it down for me. What are these different eras?
All right, so we've got the Shusho era, which ran from 1954 to 1975, then the Heisei era from 1984 to 1995, then the Millennium era from 1999 to 2004, and finally the current Reiwa era, which started in 2016.
Wow, that's a lot of Godzilla. So let's start with the Showa era. What was happening with Godzilla during those years?
Well, the Showa era is really interesting because it saw Godzilla go through some pretty major transformations.
Transformations?
Yeah. See, in the beginning, he was this terrifying force of nature representing, the horrors of nuclear war. But as the series progressed, his character started to shift.
How so?
Well, he gradually became more of a protector, almost like a superhero fighting against other monsters and threats to Japan and even the world.
So he went from being a symbol of fear to a symbol of hope.
You could say that, yeah. And a lot of this had to do with trying to appeal to a younger audience.
Like kids.
Exactly. They even introduced Godzilla's son Manila in one of the films.
Oh, yeah. I remember Manila. He was kind of cute in a weird way.
He definitely had a different vibe than the original Godzilla.
No kidding. But the Showa era also gave us some of the most iconic monsters in the entire franchise, didn't it?
Absolutely. This was the era of King Ghidorah, Mothra Rodan, and so many others.
Those are some big names in the monster world.
They are. King Ghidorah in particular became Godzilla's arch nemesis, and they've had some epic battles over the years.
It's like the monster equivalent of Superman and Lex Luthor.
Huh. I guess you could say that. And of course, we can't forget Mechagodzilla, the robotic Godzilla clone.
Oh, yeah. Mechagodzilla. Always a formidable opponent.
Definitely. The Showa era was like a golden age of monster creation.
It sounds like it. But what about the man inside the suit? Was it always the same actor playing Godzilla?
Well, for a large part of the Showa era, the actor Haruo Nakajima was the one who brought Godzilla to life.
Wow, so he was the OG Godzilla performer.
He was. He played the role from the original film in 1954 all the way until 1972 when he retired.
That's dedication. It must have been grueling work, though, wearing that heavy suit and all.
I can't even imagine. But Nakajima was a true professional, and he really helped to define the physicality and personality of Godzilla.
That's awesome. So after the Ashikawa era came the Heisei era, right? What was different about this period?
Well, the Heisei era, which started in 1984 with the return of Godzilla, was kind of a reboot of the franchise.
A reboot?
Yeah, they decided to ignore all the films that came after the original 1954 Godzilla and go back to a more serious and darker tone.
So no more cuddly Godzilla fighting alongside his son?
Not exactly. The Heisei era was all about bringing back the terrifying, destructive force of nature that Godzilla originally represented.
Interesting. Why the change in direction?
Well, I think there was a feeling that the series had strayed a bit too far from its roots, and they wanted to reestablish Godzilla as a true force to be reckoned with.
Back to his scary roots.
Exactly. And they also placed a bigger emphasis on the scientific explanations behind Godzilla's existence.
Oh, really? Like what kind of explanation?
Well, they delved more into his origins as a mutated dinosaur called Godzillasaurus, and they explored the genetic and biological aspects of his powers.
So they tried to ground it in a bit more realism.
Oh, as much realism as you can get with a giant radioactive lizard monster.
That's fair. But it sounds like they were trying to make it more than just a mindless monster mash.
They were definitely trying to add some depth and complexity to the story, and I think they succeeded.
So who is the actor playing Godzilla in this era?
The main performer was Kenpachiro Satsuma, and he brought a different kind of energy to the role. He was known for his martial arts skills, so he gave Godzilla a more agile and powerful fighting style.
Cool. So after the Heisei era, we get to the Millennium era, right?
That's right. The Millennium era began in 1999 with Godzilla 2000, Millennium, and it continued until 2004.
What was unique about this period?
Well, the Millennium series was kind of like an anthology. Each film was largely a standalone story, with only loose connections to the previous ones.
Oh, so kind of like a reset button with each new movie?
Yeah, pretty much. Most of the films acted as if only the original 1954 film had happened, and then they built their own unique stories from there.
So did they bring back any of the classic monsters from the previous era?
Oh, yeah. They definitely brought back some favorites like King Ghidorah and Mothra, but they also introduced some new monsters as well.
It seems like there's always room for more monsters in the Godzilla universe.
There's always room for more.
But this era came to an end in 2004 with Godzilla: Final Wars.
Yes, Final Wars was supposed to be a big celebration of the franchise's 50th anniversary, and it was packed with monsters in action.
Sounds epic.
It was pretty wild. But after Final Wars, Toho decided to put the series on hiatus for a while.
A hiatus? Why did they do that?
Well, I think they felt like they needed to take a break and reassess things.
Yeah.
Maybe they were running out of ideas, or maybe they just wanted to let the franchise rest for a bit.
I can see that.
But whatever the reason, the hiatus didn't last forever, and eventually Godzilla returned in a big way.
Enter the Reiwa era.
Exactly. The Reiwa era began in 2016 with Shin Godzilla, and it's been going strong ever since.
Shin Godzilla was a huge hit, wasn't it?
It was. Critically acclaimed and a box office success, it kind of revitalized the whole franchise.
What was so special about it?
Well, for one thing, it was a return to the more serious and thought-provoking tone of the original film.
Kind of like the Heisei era.
Yeah, there were definitely some similarities, but Shin Godzilla also had a very modern feel to it.
What do you mean?
Well, it dealt with contemporary issues like bureaucracy and the government's response to a major crisis.
Godzilla as a metaphor for red tape.
Kind of. But it worked really well, and the film was visually stunning, too.
I remember hearing about that they used some really innovative special effects.
They did. A great blend of traditional tokusatsu techniques and modern CGI.
The best of both worlds.
Exactly. And after Shin Godzilla, Toho decided to take the franchise in some new and interesting directions.
Like what?
Well, they produced a trilogy of anime films that were released on Netflix.
Anime Godzilla. That sounds pretty cool.
It was definitely different, but I think it appealed to a whole new generation of fans.
And they also made a really unique anime series called Godzilla Singular Point.
Oh yeah, that one was really interesting. It had a very distinct art style and a really complex storyline.
So they were really branching out with the anime stuff.
They were, but they haven't abandoned live-action films either.
Of course not.
In fact, the most recent film, Godzilla -1, premiered in 2023, and it's been a huge success.
It won an Oscar, didn't it?
It did. Best Visual Effects,
Mm-hmm.
which was a first for a Godzilla film and a Japanese film in that category.
That's incredible.
It really is. And they've already announced that a new film is in development with Takashi Yamazaki, who wrote and directed -1.
Wow, so the future of Godzilla is looking pretty bright.
It definitely is. Toho has really done a great job of keeping the franchise fresh and relevant for modern audiences.
It's amazing how Godzilla has managed to stay so popular for so long.
I know. He's a true icon of pop culture.
Speaking of which, we've talked a lot about Toho and the Japanese side of things, but what about America? Godzilla's had a pretty interesting relationship with Hollywood, hasn't he?
Oh, he has. You know, the first attempt to bring Godzilla to American screens actually predates Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Really?
Yeah, back in the 1950s, there was a project called the Volcano Monsters that was supposed to use footage from the Japanese film Godzilla raids. Again.
So like a re-edit with a new story.
Exactly. They even shipped the Godzilla and Anguirus monster suits over to the U.S., but unfortunately the funding fell through.
Oh, no. So what happened?
Well, instead of making the volcano monsters, they just dubbed Godzilla Raids, again into English, and released it in America under a different title, Gigantus the Fire Monster.
Gigantus the Fire Monster. That's a mouthful.
It is, and kind of a strange choice, but hey, you got Godzilla in front of American audiences.
That's what matters, I guess.
Right. And then in the 1980s, there was another attempt to make an American Godzilla film, this time in 3D.
Oh, wow. 3D Godzilla back in the 80s.
I know, right? It was called Godzilla, King of the Monsters in 3D. And it was going to be directed by Steve Miner, who did Friday the 13th Part 2 and Part 3.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and they had Rick Baker, who was a legendary special effects artist, lined up to create the Godzilla animatronic.
That would have been amazing to see.
It would have been, but sadly the budget was too high and the project never got off the ground.
That's a shame. But then, of course, in 1998, America finally got its own big-budget Godzilla film.
The one directed by Roland Emmerich.
Yep, that one. It was, well, let's just say it received mixed reactions.
That's putting it mildly.
Yeah, some people liked it, but a lot of Godzilla fans were really disappointed.
It was a pretty big departure from the classic Godzilla design and personality.
Toho wasn't too happy about it either, were they?
No, they weren't. They actually trademarked the name Zilla to refer to the Emmerich version of Godzilla.
So they basically disowned it.
Pretty much. They wanted to make it clear that that was not their Godzilla.
It's kind of funny when you think about it.
It is. But hey, at least America got another shot at making a good Godzilla film.
And that's where Legendary Pictures comes in, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Legendary Pictures launched their own Godzilla franchise in 2014 with a reboot simply titled Godzilla.
And that one was a big hit.
It was. It was a critical and commercial success, and it spawned a whole shared universe of monster movies.
The MonsterVerse?
Yep, the MonsterVerse. We've had Godzilla, King of the Monsters, Godzilla vs. Kong, and now there's a new one on the way, Godzilla x Kong, the new empire.
So America finally figured out how to do Godzilla justice.
It seems so. Legendary's done a really good job of respecting the source material while also bringing something new to the table.
It's amazing how much Godzilla has permeated pop culture worldwide.
It really is. He's more than just a movie monster. He's a global icon.
And his image has evolved so much over the years.
Absolutely. He went from being a terrifying symbol of nuclear destruction to an anti-hero to even a full-fledged superhero in some cases.
He's had quite the journey.
He has. And it's interesting to think about how his portrayal reflects the changing anxieties of different eras.
Right, like in the 50s, he was all about the fear of nuclear war. But in more recent films, he's often portrayed as a protector of Earth.
Like a force of nature, fighting against other threats, whether they're monsters, aliens, or even climate change.
He's like the ultimate eco-warrior.
Haha, maybe he is. But his popularity speaks to something deeper, I think.
What do you mean?
Well, I think people are drawn to his power, his resilience, and his connection to nature.
He's a symbol of something primal and untamable.
Exactly. And in a world that's increasingly complex and uncertain, I think people find comfort in that.
I can see that. He's like a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there's still hope.
I like that. He's a symbol of hope, a symbol of resilience, a symbol of the power of nature.
He's Godzilla.
He is Godzilla.
So it seems like your sources have opened up this huge can of worms filled with monster mayhem and cultural significance.
They really have. It's amazing how much there is to discover about Godzilla.
And I've always been fascinated by how he's been adapted and reinterpreted for different audiences around the world.
Me too. I mean,
Yeah.
we've talked about the Americanizations, but there have been so many other versions of Godzilla over the years.
Like the Italian Godzilla, which was colorized and had all sorts of weird footage added to it.
Oh yeah, that one's a classic. It's amazing how each culture seems to put its own spin on Godzilla.
It's a testament to his global appeal.
It really is. He's a truly universal monster.
So to sum it all up, Godzilla is more than just a giant lizard stomping on buildings.
Way more.
He's a reflection of our hopes and fears, our anxieties, and our fascination with the unknown.
He's a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable destruction, we can still find a way to persevere.
He's a symbol of the power of nature, both its beauty and its potential for chaos.
And he's a character who continues to evolve and surprise us after all these years.
Thanks for taking us on this deep dive into the world of Godzilla. It's been an incredibly enlightening journey.
My pleasure. I'm glad we could explore all these fascinating facets of the King of the Monsters.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I need to go watch some Godzilla movie.
I don't blame you.
Until next time,
Farewell.
and long live the king.
Long live the king.